Vietnam casualty figures came out today. They show that 2 Americans lost their lives last week in combat, while 30 were wounded. South Vietnamese combat
losses. We're making up this road. We're getting ambushed. We haven't had a 60 work on our track. Forgot out how long. We're just all worn out. Everything's going someplace else.
Soldiers are occurring. They said thousands.
They stopped the truck. They didn't stop the truck. They slowed down a little bit. And it was just like response to the guys get up, including the lieutenants. They just blew all the kids away. There was about 5 or 6 kids blown away.
More than 25 rounds have already impacted the airport last week.
It seems now certainly the experience of Vietnam is to work in a safe.
I award you today an overly cluster.
I can report that Vietnamization has succeeded.
One of the cruelest places in the world today is Cambodia, a country run today by the Khmer Rouge revolutionaries. No news coverage is allowed there, but our correspondent, Jack Reynolds, has been on the border with Thailand, and here are some of the dreadful things he has learned.
In January of this year, the Cambodians sent a force into Thai territory. They brutally murdered 30 Thai villagers. When the Khmer Rouge marched victoriously into Phnom Penh, no one knew how they would rule Cambodia.
June 11, 1981 was the first day my family and I arrived in the confusing world of America. The plane landed in the morning. It was summertime. The weather was fine. After leaving the airport, we were brought to the Hamilton Air Force Base in San Rafael. The sun shone very brightly, but it was cold to me. What a summer is here, I say to myself. We were brought out of Hamilton Air Force Base to San Francisco. I felt so happy. On the way to San Francisco, I was really happy to see many different things. But I still miss my own country and thought about the people and the land I had left behind. It was like living in a world with two doors. One door for my life I had left behind, and the other for my new life in America. One thing that attracted my attention was Golden Gate Bridge. I was very surprised to see that its color does not go along with its name, as I had heard. The name is Golden Gate Bridge, but the color is rusty red. But we passed the bridge, and there it was, a huge city with tall buildings. My name is Ratanaim. I am a Cambodian refugee. I live in San Francisco with my parents and 6 brothers. My life in Cambodia before Pol Pot regime was okay. My father was a soldier and I was a student. At school I took English, Cambodian, physics, chemistry, math, and history. I'm really happy that I had studied English in Cambodia because at the present time it really helps me a lot. Entrance. Next exit. Can you go in this way? It was very hard to come to the United States because it took very long and we had to escape from Cambodia to Thailand. We had to stay there a long time and then we were sent to Philippines. We had to stay there about 7 months and then we were sent to the United States.
I was hired by the International Rescue Committee, which is an organization that's been in existence since 1939, dealing in basically the moving of refugee persons from point A to point B. In 1980, I was hired by them to go into Thailand to start a training program for laboratory diagnosis at the Aranya Protect Camp in Prachinburi province. I was also hired as a liaison person for the lab in Kawidan, which at that time was run by an organization called World Vision. It's important to remember that these people, the Cambodians, are coming out of a geographical area that takes in an area equivalent to Oregon and the Rocky Mountain states. And their mode of transmission of information is basically mouth to mouth and village to village. So when you have a situation where you've got members of a family living in Washington State and another portion of that family living in Akron, Ohio, you're talking about distances that these people are not familiar with. I think that's going to, just geographically, I think the United States is going to have an impact on their culture. I don't think that there's any question but that the refugees, at the time that I arrived on the scene, which was January of 1980, their condition was extreme. Incidents of diseases such as meningitis, diphtheria, neonatal tetanus, typhoid, measles, polio, were extremely high. Malaria. The camp that I was first assigned to, the Orion Quartet camp, was at that time processing somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 patients a day, had an inpatient population of somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 patients, and they were functioning without the benefit of a laboratory.
My fellow Americans, we live in an age of anarchy, both abroad and at home. If, when the chips are down, the world's most powerful nation, the United States of America, acts like a pitiful, helpless giant, the forces of totalitarianism and anarchy will threaten free nations and free institutions throughout the world. In cooperation with the armed forces of South Vietnam, attacks are being launched this week in the Cambodian-Vietnam border. A major responsibility for the ground operations is being assumed by South Vietnamese forces, with the United States providing air and logistical support. There is one area, however, where I have concluded that a combined American and South Vietnamese operation is necessary. This is not an invasion of Cambodia.
We got word that we were to come over here, combat assault into Cambodia as part of the offensive that's going on right now. Yesterday we moved into this area where we are right now, Fire Support Base Evans, named in honor of one of the men of our battalion. Our units are operating in the jungle out away from here, anywhere from 2 to 8 kilometers under our artillery fan. We've been working all day here, and we'll continue to work for a few more days getting the fire support base itself set up so that we have a solid base from which to support the rest of them and from which we can fire the artillery.
Because I don't believe that the communist regime is the right one for the Cambodian people, I don't like the communists. When the Lung Nor Revolution, I was a volunteer to serve the Lung Nor Army. On October 1973, 5 o'clock in the morning, the Khmer Rouge fight against my troops. At that time, I recommend the troops goes up into the first line to fight against them. I back up a little bit to be helped directing the cannon 81 millimeter. Suddenly, I was found by the slide of the bomb of Khmer explode about 10 meters from me. On April 17, 1975, the Khmer Rouge took over of the country Cambodian. People go outside the country, the town, they don't have the food for eat, no medicine, no clothing, and no housing too. The people of the Cambodian, then the rank of the Khmer Rouge, die 3.5 million people. Also, my country, my family, we die too. My father, my mother, my sister, and my brother. People too much die.
When the Khmer Rouge come to town, oh aye, there'll be a dreadful bloodbath when the Khmer Rouge come to town. And there was. The evidence was there that there might be, but we didn't wish to consider the implications of it. They were too confusing, too frightful. And why, when the bloodbath began, and it began very quickly, did it take us so long to realize it, that it was going on, still less to do anything after 1975 to mobilize against it?
The official American policy, in their own words, is to support what's called the Democratic Kampuchea Coalition, based primarily on Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. And the policy is to support them because of their continuity with the Pol Pot regime. That's the official basis for American policy. We support the Khmer Rouge, we support the current Khmer Rouge-based coalition because of their continuity with Pol Pot. The purpose of this is pretty transparent, both on the part of China and the United States.
America is supporting Khmer Rouge. It's very surprising and shocking.
Who would have thought that after the Khmer Rouge were overthrown by their former ally, Vietnam, in 1979, the majority of the world would still today be supporting the Khmer Rouge claim to the Cambodian seat at the United Nations? When does a liberation become an occupation?
We want to carry out the policy of what they call bleeding Vietnam. And as I say, China, our ally, which is less inhibited, has openly said that the purpose of supporting the Khmer Rouge is to make Vietnam suffer. Of course, it also makes the people of Cambodia suffer. I mean, the Khmer Rouge survive as a major military force because of the direct aid given to them by China, our ally, and the indirect aid which we give them. We give the aid through Thailand.
I think that America should not support them because, as in the past, they did a very bad thing. My family and I, and also everyone else, were forced out of the city. For the young people who are over 18, they were sent to the labor camps, and most of them died because of starvation.
I don't think these people could have made it through the Holocaust that they experienced if it had not been for the strength of their family ties.
There is no doubt in my mind that America, because of its involvement in Indochina, and especially in Vietnam, is responsible for the exiles of thousands and thousands of refugees in this country and other countries in the world.
I'd like to define the CIA for you very briefly. The CIA is not an intelligence agency. The CIA is the covert action arm of the President's foreign policy advisors. In that capacity, it supports or overthrows foreign governments and reports intelligence justifying those activities. This occurs even in such areas as Soviet nuclear weaponry. Disinformation is a major function of the agency, and the American people are the primary target audience of the operation. I come to that, I see there's some sympathizers to that view. I come to that realization after a very long and painful examination of what was going on in Vietnam.
I remember back in 1945, more than 2 million Vietnamese died of starvation. None of us left Vietnam. And again, in 1954, the country was divided in two. More than 1 million Vietnamese from the north came to the south, and none of us left Vietnam. It is only since 1975 that more than 1 million Vietnamese are trying to escape to leave the country.
Early 1954, the decision was made to replace the French in Vietnam. We had decided that the French had lost the will to go ahead and remain in Vietnam and to fight the North. So we, the Americans, were going to replace them. And that was outlined in a National Security Council Directive 5429, which said, among other things, we must disassociate France from the levers of command, submit our aid directly through the Vietnamese, not through the French, as they had been doing prior to that. We must have Diem write a draft constitution, and we must legally dethrone Bao Dai. The agency took Diem out of isolation somewhere in the United States, established him as premier in Saigon, and when he arrived in Saigon, he came off the plane and said, well, here I am, I'm the premier. There's nobody there to greet him but Colonel Lansdale. He had nothing. He had no supporters. The pro-French Wahao, the Cao Dai, the Binzuan were all for the French. The Buddhists were opposed to Diem because he was Catholic. And the supporters of Ho Chi Minh were against Diem because they wanted a communist government under Ho Chi Minh. The agency used its full bag of tricks of disinformation. It promised Vietnamese that they would be taken care of if they would migrate to the south. Some still resisted this, so it dropped leaflets showing what would happen should the United States decide to use atomic bombs in North Vietnam. The agency provided transportation south for those who decided to go south on its CAT Civil Air Transport Airlines.
Wrongly or rightly, we chose to support and be friends of the U.S. Promises and commitments were made if we fought the war.
The United States fought the war in order to prevent the danger that successful social and economic development could take place in Vietnam within an independent nationalist framework, and that would be, as the planners put it, a rotten apple, and the rot would spread throughout the region, and other people would do the same thing.
We wanted to convince the American people that this is what it really wasn't. There was a sort of a propaganda barrage in the United States saying that here is evidence of the diseased, mutilated North Vietnamese fleeing from the godless cruelties of the communists. And it gave the illusion that this was the vast majority of the people who were rejecting the Viet Minh rule, Ho Chi Minh's rule, when in fact it was a minority group of Catholic Vietnamese. When the North Vietnamese arrived, they were organized into a police force for Diem. They were organized into an army, and the U.S. military took care of arming the North Vietnamese army, and they set up a government for Diem. So now he could rule. Shortly thereafter, Bao Dai, who was the French representative, or this French puppet in Saigon, was deposed in a rigged election that Diem won with 98% majority. Of course, rigging elections is a traditional agency operation. The culmination of all this, we had the government, the police, the army of Diem ruling this Catholic, 10% Catholic minority government, ruling the 80% Buddhist population. Well, the rural South Vietnamese peasants resisted the imposition of this rule over them.
Charlie Company, first of fifth Wagon.
We do not, for those of you that are unaware, have normal relations with Vietnam now. We do not even have the threshold step of diplomatic recognition of Vietnam. And when you ask the question, why, and when you look to see the impact of all of that, I suggest you consider the following. In November, when we dedicated the National Memorial for the Vietnam War in Washington, D.C., I was invited to meet with President Reagan. And what he did was use the opportunity of having a group of Vietnam veterans to go on and denounce Vietnam, citing the hundreds of thousands, as he put it, who are being murdered and tortured, and citing the plight of the people who have risked their lives to flee the country as the justification, finally, for our war of a decade ago. He said, what you see in Indochina today is proof that ours was a just war. And I suggest that when you think about that there may be some political considerations in frustrating any recovery in Indochina and continuing to portray the leadership there as the bad guys, and somehow after the fact providing the justification for the war that we fought. And the other thing you have to consider when you look to the status of Indochina today is just how devastating, in fact, that war was. It's true we may have lost the war, but make no mistake about it, we won the battle. In the Second World War, we dropped 2.5 million tons of bombs in both Europe and the Pacific. In Vietnam, by air alone, we dropped over 7 million tons. When you add to that your naval gunfire, your artillery, and the other ordnance that was dumped on that country, you had more than 14 million tons of bombs and ordnance dropped on Vietnam. The most heavily bombed country in the history of the world. The result of that kind of violence was that 1 out of 30 people in all of Indochina was killed. 1 out of 12 was wounded. And 1 out of 5 was made a refugee.
Saigon, April the 30th, 8 o'clock. The last American helicopter on the roof of the American embassy prepares to lift off the last of the evacuees fleeing before the advancing communist armies. The American airlift only took a fraction of those who wanted to leave, and for hours after the last departure, scores of people still crowded onto the embassy roof in the vain hope of rescue. One of them was an American employer who tried to get all his staff out.
I had one select man that should definitely have left. I was waiting for him. He's sitting up here now, and here we are.
How do you rate the chances?
Negligible now.
Do you think the last ones have gone?
I think they're all gone.
The first wave of Indo-Chinese refugees, from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos came in 1975. There is two kinds of refugee wave of immigration. The first wave is the first wave in 1975, when there was a political collapse and military collapse in Indochina. And at that time, the majority of the refugees coming to the United States were mostly people who are very westernized, or people who work for the government, for U.S. military personnel, and so on. And those people come in the United States either by military airlift, or they could manage to go to Thailand and from there fly to a camp to be resettled in the United States. Comparing to the 1975 Vietnamese refugees into this country who, as I told you, are coming from urban background and westernized people, both people, the Vietnamese refugees coming after 78, 79, are mostly coming from peasant and rural background without education. And most people have to go through tremendous stress. And when they come here, they have a lot of difficulties in adjusting. And if you compare to the 1975 refugee who had received a lot of assistance, initial resettlement assistance in this country, I remember that they used to have 3 years of public assistance in having them resettled in this country. Nowadays, both people, who are less equipped culturally and educationally speaking, they have been only receiving 18 months, which is only half the amount of aid being received by the 1975 people who are more educated.
My name is Kai Nguyen Phua, and I've been teaching ESL and bilingual for the last 6-7 years. Actually, I started out in Florida when there was an onset of Indo-Chinese students to the country, and that was in 1975. Today, I have 32 students, and 60% of them are Asian, mostly from Indochina. In this class, it's happened that the English-speaking students are black students, and the Asian are mostly Indo-Chinese. And a lot of people ask me if there are any hostilities or prejudice between the black students and the Asian students. But I think, frankly, that if there was any prejudice or misunderstanding, is so because of the perception of the adults toward the other groups. But among themselves, they coexist very well, and I don't think there's any prejudice among them, because you can see a lot of times when I have some beginners who just came from Vietnam or Cambodia who doesn't speak English, the American kids are so good in helping them, are so willing to help them. In fact, some of them even ask me when I'm going to teach them Vietnamese. Very good, no mistake.
Yes, he do.
He did. Yes, he did.
Yes, he does.
He does, he did, but not he do. Okay, let's look at Tiffany. You write too small. Kennedy is wrong. This one is bigger because this is same thing as 6.0 or same thing as, okay, all this is same. Okay, that means like you have $6. Now if you have, what's going on over there? Okay, if you have $6.6, okay, this part right here, this the same? So if you be careful, if somebody sign you a check and put the decimal point here, he's cheating you a lot of money out of, okay? $150 and $1.50. $1 and 50 cents. This is $150. Okay. He cheats you a lot. So you have to be careful where the decimal points are, okay? I thought you know this long time ago. How come you're still making mistakes? Huh? Okay. I think most people, when they talk about the Indo-Chinese students, do not realize what kind of problems or endurance that they've been through. And they do not know why the children come here. In fact, they don't even consider these students boat students, per se. Boat student implies that the children have escaped or have come out of Vietnam by a very unseaworthy boat. And in the course of their flight, they have to go through rape, pillage, and murders.
Because they have to undergo tremendous traumatic experiences during their flight to freedom, many boat people, refugees, are undergoing a lot of psychological pressure, stresses, and even mental disorders. And that traumatic experience still have a very profound influence in the daily life of those refugees who still have to resettle in a new culture, a new land, and so on. And those many people who come here for clinical care, have been depressed for even 2 years or 3 years, during which time they do not even have a good night's sleep. Maybe the most they can sleep is about 3 hours a day. They cannot concentrate when they learn English in the classroom. They lost concentration. They feel fatigue, very loss of energy. They cannot even have any interest in going out. And those people are, I have an example here, for instance, a woman, 40 years old, and she lost her husband at sea. And she came in a boat with 40 people, but only about 3/4 of the people were perished at sea by the pirates who attacked the boat, and her husband was killed in front of her. And she came here with her daughter, who's 7 years old, and that daughter is still having nightmare every day.
But this neighborhood, the Tenderloin of San Francisco, traditionally has always been the port of entry for new immigrants. So many ethnics had been here before, and once they establish themselves, they move out to other area of the city. And now it is the turn of the Indo-Chinese refugees. There are several thousand people here now, and we live, we go to school, we work. Indeed, we open business in this area here. So by necessity, both the composition and the appearance of the neighborhood is changing. And for the last 3-4 years that we have been working in this neighborhood, it's changing drastically, and I think it's for the better. Children go to school in the morning, school on the street. In the afternoon, they play on the street. Their parents go to tend to their job, and then business keeps cropping up. And eventually, I think this will be a safer neighborhood, more habitable and healthier.
Southeast Asian refugees had came to Westminster since '79 after the movement of poor people in Indochina. There are many ethnic from Indochina who appear in this community. The Chinese Vietnamese, the Cambodian, the Laotian, a little more, and of course the Vietnamese. The refugee population in Westminster is about 1/10, means 8,000 above the total of 80,000 other cities. There are about 250 businesses among them, while the total businesses of the whole Orange and Los Angeles County are about 800.
This building is owned by my agency, the Indo-Chinese Housing Development Corporation of San Francisco, for explicit purpose of to provide affordable housing to refugees in the Tenderloin area. We purchased this building in December 1981, and it has 82 units, so each of them has their own bathroom and kitchen. Right now, there's between 300 people also living in the building here. The majority of them are refugees from Indochina. This is our very first building, and for the last year, our first year of operation, it has been relatively successful. And we're certainly looking forward to provide more such units for the refugee community in Tenderloin area, because right now we have between 6,000 to 7,000 refugees alone in these few square blocks here. So definitely we plan to purchase more. Well, we want to invest in this neighborhood to make it a better place to live, a better place for kids to grow up, and that we want desperately a small playground. However small it is, but a place for kids to play instead of skipping over the drunks on the street.
Most refugees are looking for to apply for citizenship of this country, since they know they are privileged to require immigrant status for their relatives at home. But politically speaking, once became citizenship, they have difficulties to adapt to Republican or Democratic, because as refugees from communist regime, they are more Republican. But since they also are immigrants, they rely to the social services of the democratic policy line.
Okay, stop sign. Stop sign, all right? Coi Chính. Coi Chính.
English Action Center has received word that as of April 1st of this year, we are receiving zero funding. We feel this is a shame because the people here are special people with unique needs. And the staff at English Action Center has had 2 years to learn how to serve these people more effectively. They are a special group of people because many come from rural backgrounds in Laos and in other Southeast Asian countries. And many of them are pre-literate in their own language, which means that their language has no written form. Because of this special background, they are having a very difficult time adjusting and learning how to fit into this literate urban society.
Most of the Laotian refugees have a difficult time to integrate the job market in this country because of first priority is English barrier, and the second is unlikely skill. The skill that these people have, they used to work on their own, the self-employed, and they work for their own food. They didn't earn any money, and they didn't used to work for someone that can order them to work, and it's really completely different, just like in front and the back hand. So it's really hard for them to get the adjustment to this country. Even they've been here for many years, the adjustment still confused, and the large family still important for them, and the relatives still important for them. So these people, they are not really, they are not lazy or don't want to work something, and they are really working hard, but the thing is over here they have to have a skill.
There are businesses along little sidewalk of Westminster. At the beginning, they met protestation from the elderly people. They live in the other side of the street. From there, they throw the rocks to the side, or sometimes baby gun have been used against the window of those shops. Teenagers went around, make noisy and yell against the population. Later, public health officials in the city claimed that the refugees have very high degree of public disease. That hurts the job opportunity of the refugees and also hurts the children at the school.
Yes, my house was vandalized. Let me start from the beginning. I came to the U.S. at USA the first month. I came to Richmond, so that's why I looking for a house, and I bought this house in 1981. So after I moved to this house, just a few months, I moved in, and I start to have trouble with the neighborhood, with the teenagers. So at first, we have they came and vandalized the house, and first they threw the rock through my window, and I fixed the window at first. Then the second time they throw it again, third time they throw it again, and I didn't fix it. After the thing happened, I knew who was doing that, and so that's why I went to talk to the one of teenager. He's 15 years old, and I went to talk to his grandpa about that. And if there is anything that we can do, or anything that they don't like that we can change, or something that we can do, I try to communicate with his grandpa, and his grandpa just denied. I not really denied. He said his grandson will listen to nobody. Just call the police and ask the police to pick him up. And when I called the police, and the police came by, and the police told me, say that they will take him, put him in the jail or something, but they never did. Then I have a hopeless. I think that no one care about me, and I think that no one can do, even the police cannot do anything because of he's a teenager. So I think that it's not a good place for me to live there, so I decided to move.
Refugee women defending themselves, defending their motive for leaving Vietnam by saying that they're in America because this is the land of hope. That is going to be shattered. That kind of dream is going to be shattered. The fact that refugees are receiving welfare, for example, AFDC, for example, are making a lot of other minority groups, such as the blacks, the Mexicans, the Hispanics, other Asian American groups, very resentful of the refugees.
Was a brilliant Vietnamese student who came here on a student scholarship at Oberlin College in 1971. He had scored first in the national examinations while a student in Vietnam. This is extremely exceptional. After finishing his schooling in the United States, he came to San Francisco and started the Vietnamese Youth Development Center, which focused its efforts on resettling Indo-Chinese refugees, getting them jobs, getting them out of school, finding them places to stay. He helped literally hundreds of Vietnamese.
The United States instituted a terrorist, violent state in Vietnam, which we used to control their own population. Before we had invaded Vietnam outright in 1965, they'd already killed maybe 160 or 170,000 of their own population, and in the subsequent years, they simply continued. It was a client regime trained in terrorism and violence by us. When the war was over and our terrorists lost, many of them were brought here. They're part of the flow of refugees, and they're going to continue to do the kind of things we trained them to do in Vietnam. So there's no doubt that they will constitute a kind of a domestic mafia comparable to the Cuban mafia. Also, similar kinds of elements that we trained, we supported, we brought here, and now they're going to do their jobs the way we trained them and the way we supported them in the local population, our population.
Among the old Saigon military are 10 to 20,000 ex-Phoenix operatives. That is the CIA-trained assassins who carried out many assassinations in Vietnam.
And lastly, with respect to political action, the CIA's manipulation of the host government and local politics, Vietnam is a veritable textbook of cautionary lessons. Don't pamper the host government by ignoring or trying to squelch its loyal opponents. Don't contribute to its corruption by aligning yourself only with those officials already corrupt enough to be willing to pocket your agents' fees. And don't try to paper over its weaknesses by plying its propaganda. Ultimately, the only one you fool is yourself.
They call themselves frogmen after the names of their units in Vietnam. They call themselves paratroopers, rangers.
Today, groups of Vietnamese ex-army officers are going through the Vietnamese refugee community, extorting millions of dollars on the pretext of preparing to go back and fight in Vietnam.
They call themselves the Committee to Exterminate Communists and Restore the Nation. They have some of the same commanders that they had in Vietnam.
Essentially, the way this political extortion operates is that it follows an anti-communist modus operandi, which is particularly effective in the Vietnamese refugee community. The way the operation works, it's like this. If you're a successful Vietnamese business person, or you appear to have some money, you get visited by representatives of these so-called ex-officers groups who request money to raise guns to go back and fight in Vietnam.
Some of the top people are Tran Minh Cong, the ex-head of the Saigon Military Academy, or that is Police Academy, the Saigon Police Academy. There's Pham Van Lưu, the ex-Saigon police chief.
The reason why these ex-officer groups hold such a strong reign of terror in the Vietnamese refugee community can be easily seen. The CIA trained assassins and counterintelligence personnel in its Phoenix program in South Vietnam, in which almost 38,000 Vietnamese were shot for being suspected Viet Cong.
The Phoenix program would operate on a 3- and 5-card informant system. In the early days of the Phoenix program, if the Phoenix operation received information that a person was part of the Viet Cong infrastructure or had sympathies with the Viet Cong, that fact was noted on a card. When 5 separate cards from 5 separate sources were gathered on that person, orders were given for that person to be eliminated.
One of Colby's creations, the Phoenix program, was very much a matter of life and death. Like the Cords apparatus of which it was a part, Phoenix was a collegial effort. It drew its intelligence from the CIA's interrogation centers and its manpower from the South Vietnamese police and military and from the terrorist squads now under Cords' control. Its purpose was to eliminate the communist political cadre network, preferably through capture, since live bodies obviously are more useful as intelligence sources than dead ones. But from its inception, the program was so fraught with chaos, it was bound to lose its way. Nobody ever bothered adequately to define what constituted a VC political cadre. Moreover, the neutralization quotas prescribed by Coma and Colby produced a pressure for quick results that could be more easily met by indiscriminate killing than by careful pursuit and capture. Under no circumstances can a program like the Phoenix be adequately controlled or accurately targeted. The less so, the larger it grows. Its very purpose, especially in a fluid and hostile environment, begets a paranoia and a quick-fix mentality that lead inexorably to excess. The Phoenix should have been allowed to languish in the ashes of Colby's imagination.
Later in the Phoenix program, this 5-card system became even more tenuous, and it became a 3-card system in the interest of expediency, one would guess. However, rather than attack the Viet Cong political infrastructure, the Phoenix program, this assassination program, was frequently used by Vietnamese officers to settle political and personal grudges.
In autumn 1968, William Colby briefed U.S. military commanders in Vietnam on a strategy which would come to be known as accelerated pacification, the combined use of regular and irregular forces to destroy communist bases and supply lines. Sounds like El Salvador.
In the Pham killing, and in at least 4 others, there have been written claims of responsibility by a group calling itself the Vietnamese Party to exterminate the communists and restore the nation. The FBI doubts that there is such a group and downplays political motivation. But police closest to the Pham case now believe the group exists and have extended their investigation to other states and Canada. There have been at least a dozen violent incidents since 1980. Apparent clashes between those seeking a new life and far-right nationalists who won't let them forget the old ones.
This old Saigon political terror apparatus, which was picked up intact and brought here to the United States, where it's now in operation, it's very powerful. They're doing the same thing here that they did in Vietnam, and that is they are killing, assassinating progressive people, just like they did in Vietnam.
There are 2 types of answers. How Vietnamese refugees feel about of America normalizing relations with Vietnam. The first answer from the people who belong to anti-communist group, they will oppose, and they don't like the idea about normalize with Vietnamese. And the second group, if they ask them, they will answer no. Or they don't want. The reason they answer no because they don't want something happen to them. They know what happened before to many Vietnamese. News reporter, former officer of previous government, like Mr. Pham, we normally call him 5-year too. He run a couple of advertising about sending gift to Vietnam or send some money to Vietnam, and he get killed and they burn him to death at his office.
I'm a representative and investigating officer on the murder of Tab Van Pham. Tab Van Pham was murdered on August 9th, 1987, in the early morning hours. The murder was an arson. Mr. Pham was trapped within his business, was unable to get out of his business, and subsequently died. The murder did take place and was caused by an incendiary device being placed into the business. Mr. Pham apparently was an editor of a newspaper. He advertised for different factions of what was later found out to be communist enterprises that were located within other countries such as Canada, France, Japan, etc. Mr. Pham subsequently ran ads within his newspaper, which was basically an entertainment periodical and not of a political nature type newspaper. Following Mr. Pham's death, the investigation that ensued, we were able to determine that the companies that Mr. Pham advertised were, or appeared to be, and the hypothesis is that these companies were set up within Canada. They were set up for the express purpose of exporting goods from the United States to communist Vietnam. The scenario that occurs is that if you're a Vietnamese American living, or an immigrant living in the United States, and you have relatives or loved ones in Vietnam, being that the Vietnamese government has no lawful or legal way to support this government, or the fact that they do not export anything from Vietnam, they have commissioned, so to say, companies that are representatives directly from the communist government in Canada. The United States presently has no trade agreement with Vietnam, and other countries such as Canada, France, etc. do have trade agreements. What happened in this case, and what we believe occurred, was that the anti-communist faction in the United States had warned Mr. Pham not to advertise for known communist companies which were based in Canada. Mr. Pham did not heed those warnings, believing that the United States was a free enterprise country. He went ahead and advertised for him after this warning. After repeated warnings, the murder did occur, and Mr. Pham died within his business.
The attacks began about 10 years ago in 1978 with a firebombing attack on Professor No Vin Long at Harvard. Then in 1981, Zung Chung Lam, a journalist, was shot in San Francisco. In 1982, Mr. Bak Bong was shot in Chinatown in Los Angeles. He was also a journalist. In the same year, Mr. Wen Zam Fong, a journalist in Houston, was shot. In 1984, two activists in San Francisco, Pham Thi Lu and her husband, Nguyen Van Lui, were shot. Mr. Lui survived. His wife, Pham Thi Lu, died. In 1984, also Professor Ed Cooperman was shot. In 1986, Mr. Tran Cang Van was shot. He had spoken out for normalization of relations with Vietnam.
I work freelance for AP and UPI in Saigon, and I was a news reporter for Vietnamese newspaper come to this country, I like to be a reporter. We live in this country, a freedom country, but we don't have a freedom press. Many Vietnamese reporters here, they don't have a right to say what they think.
My good friend Ed Cooperman was killed in October of 1984 as a result of a conspiracy by the old Saigon political terror apparatus. Ed had been harassed and threatened for 7 years. The threats had built up in the month prior to his death. In fact, only a few days prior to his being shot, he told a colleague that he expected an attack, and he almost described exactly what happened. Ed had worked very closely with Vietnamese scientists. He went to Vietnam at least once a year. He was instrumental in arranging to have Vietnamese scientists come to the United States, where he arranged their collaboration with American scientists. They worked on such things together as Agent Orange diseases. Ed was a great force for normalization of relations with Vietnam. There appears to be a degree of tacit collaboration between these terror attacks and the U.S. government in the form of the secret team that we've heard about during the Iran-Contra hearings.
I was attacked by a group of people because I had an article, and the article criticized a former high-rank officer who worked for former Vietnamese government.
Because these CIA people have worked with the old Saigon political terror apparatus for many years now, and there's every indication that they still work together. Because the terror attacks have been going on for 10 years. There's yet to be a strong investigation. There's yet to be a strong prosecution. There's yet to be anyone in the U.S. government speaking out strongly against this wave of terror.
After 3 weeks spending in Vietnam, I see one thing is Vietnamese government, they want to normalize relationship with America. The Vietnamese government and Vietnam is changing a lot, and I think they need to normalize relationship because to United States because they need money to improve the country. And if they improve the country, I think that's a good chance for Vietnamese people who live in Vietnam. I criticize the communists, but the way I criticize them, I have an idea to solve the problem. That's the reason why the Vietnamese who live in the United States, many of them don't like my idea. They just criticize them only, and the idea they have, they overthrow the communist regime, and they think only one thing is overthrow the communist regime, then can save the country. I don't think that's a good idea, because Vietnamese has 30 years war, and I don't think we should have another 30 years war. So the guy like me, I travel to Vietnam. I am the first Vietnamese news reporter go back to Saigon. I go from north to central to south Vietnam. To me, Vietnam is changing a lot. Everything new coming every day. And we hope, I hope, Vietnamese who live in Vietnam will have a better life if the government keep changing and keep improving the country. I hope, because I love my people, Vietnamese. It doesn't mean that I like communists or I don't like communists. I am the guy who do my job, not belong to anti-communist group, not belong to communist group, but I am Vietnamese who love Vietnamese people. Six or 7 months ago, the government did not allow the people do some kind of business, like private business. The citizens can open the business themselves, normally belong to a government, but now they allow them to open their own business. And the people who live in Vietnam hoping if something changes like this and the government improve the country like they say, then the Vietnamese people who live in Vietnam may have a better life.
And there is every reason for the United States to normalize relations with Vietnam. It would solve so many problems.
Young guy like me, I love a country, like a lot of Vietnamese who live outside of the country. Love Vietnamese, love the country.
This is my sister, this is my friend. I live down the hall with my father and my mother.
Many Laotians who join in the military that we call the direct support from the U.S. Government, that some people call CIA. And most of these people, they are hills people that we call tribal, Hmong, Mien, Khmer, and other tribes.
William Colby, initially station chief in Saigon and then head of the agency's Far East Division, laid the groundwork for the CIA's secret war in Laos by dispatching operatives to organize Mao tribesmen into small self-defense units. He also attempted to counter communist guerrilla tactics in South Vietnam with the first of a series of pacification programs. Village defense units and terrorist squads were organized in the highlands and around Saigon, and a Vietnamese version of the American Special Forces was created under its own independent command by CIA bagmen assisted by the U.S. Green Berets. For good measure, reconnaissance teams were launched over the beaches into North Vietnam and across the border into southern Laos. None of them proved very efficient.
And these people get trained by the American military advisor from in Thailand or in Laos before they start. And these people work close with the American advisor in Laos. So many places, many cities got bombed by the American.
เขาเป็นทหารอยู่ลาวได้15 ปีจึงได้ตกมาไทย
My father, he was a soldier in Laos, 15 years.
ไทยที่ไหนวะ
And he come to Thailand,
ทูไทยแลนด์
to Thailand
แคมป์ปักส้ม
and we moved to America.
ค่อยเป็นทหารบ้านค่อยอยู่ลาวค่อยตุนมาไทยได้2 ปีค่อยจึงสัมภาษณ์มาอเมริกาลูกพร้อมด้วยลูกเมียทั้ง4 คน
My father, he was a soldier in Laos, and we write something. They write something for us to come to America. My sister and my father and my mother and me.
บ้านค่อยอยู่นี่ค่อยมักอยู่นี่แล้วก็ค่อยขวดกินค่อยกินข้าวอยู่นี่ลูกค่อยก็อยู่นี่พวกก็อยู่นี่พร้อมด้วยทุกคน
She make a dinner for all this family, and we'd like to stay here.